What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video slash devlog slash tutorial of the game I'm developing. And on this video, I'm gonna show you how to build a clothing system. And the good news is people that are not familiar with C++, they can do that also with blueprints, at least the basic stuff. So basically, that's how it's gonna work. So I have a couple items under the level, and each item has its own properties. So let me just open up the, oops, not the pickup, but let me just open up the data asset for the sword, for example. Each one has its own properties. For example, this sword doesn't increase anything on the character health once equipped, but it increases its strength and stamina, magic points, speed, etc., etc. And the same goes for the other items, which is basically the clothing. So the chest increases that much, and there's like the thumbnail and etc. So all the things are inside of data sets. I'm not going to cover how to do data sets and pickups, etc. right now. I'm just going to show you how to build the clothing system and how to actually apply on your game. So this is just for me to show that each item has its own properties. And if you want to take a look at how did I build the game playability system, double check a previous, I forgot the video, but you can see in the playlist that there's like a deep dive into the game playability system, which is what I'm using right now to apply those settings once I equip those items. But let's go through it. So if you open up the character, for example, you see that the character has lots of clothing in it, like the main mesh, which is just a face, uh, the hair, if you want to change later, the helmet, the shoulder pad, the chest mat, the backpack, etc., etc., etc. So all those meshes are attached to the main mesh, and they're following the animation blueprint, and that can be done on the blueprint level as well. So if you create a character, just adds up like as much items as you want, like the backpack, the static mesh, or uh, other meshes, skeletal, and on on the C++, do the same. So I'm gonna open up the festival character. Let me just open up the header file if I can do that. There we go. So you see that for my header file on my character, I'm gonna have like which weapon I'm using, and that's gonna determine later on which animation should I play it. For example, if I'm using like a sword and shield, I may use state machine for sword and shield. If I'm using bow and arrow, I should change my state machines and my animations to bow and arrow applicable ones. If I'm not using any of those, I should maybe just use regular animations without any weapon attached to it. Um, and for the character itself, you see that each one has, there we go. Let me just scroll down a little bit until I find it. They're under protected. And if I can find that, there we go. So each one has, for example, the hair mesh, the head mesh in C++. That's how you would declare most of the time. And once you're building that character under the constructor, you should just find those as well. You should just create whatever you want it to. So, for example, the hair the mesh is the basic one, like skeletal mesh. I'm just pointing out to that face. I'm hard coding that. You shouldn't do that, but for the sake of you know um, skipping time and being sure that at least I have like the proper animation blueprint already set up, I'm hard coding and loading that skeletal mesh over here, which is just basically grabbing that face mesh over here. So what I did basically, I just grabbed that face mesh, went to whatever that is, and I copy the reference under the asset, copy reference, asset location. No, where is it? Copy reference. There we go. I just basically copy that over, paste it here under that. So I load that skeletal mesh to be my main mesh, at least the base mesh. And then the rest of the mesh, which is the hair, the helmet, I just created and attached to my main mesh. So that face mesh over there. Also, if you have, for example, weapons, which are static meshes in my specific case, you could use a skeletal as well. But not only I attach to my character, but I also attach to a socket. So if you open up the character, let me just open the skeleton one, you see that that's the main skeleton, but I have like a couple attachment to it. So for example, the shield over here, it's a socket, which is basically just grab whatever the hand there is, I just added socket name to shield, and then let me just add a shield over here. So shield, and then I move it up like a preview mesh, so I can, kind of have the proper location of a preview of where the shield would be attached once I, actually create a shield and attach to my character. Let me just remove the children's, remove attach assets. I did the same for the weapon too, in case I'm using like a two-handed sword. Not two-handed, so sorry, two swords, one on each hand. And the same goes for the weapon one, which is basically the, let me just open at a preview asset. Let me just add a sword here. Let me just grab a low poly one, this one. So this one, for example, I did the same, and I added, modified the location, etc., and I, grabbed that name from it. So I know that my weapon 1 is going to be under the weapon 1. I can rename that if I wanted to, and the shield is going to be under shield, weapon 2 under weapon 2, and you can do the same. So once you create that one as well, and you can do that as well under the actual blueprint just by dragging, and uh, under the blueprint you can do that over here. Let me just grab this, and you see that I forgot where it is, but under blueprint somewhere you can put a socket. There we go, parent socket. So you can, under blueprint, once you're wedding, you can just parent to the socket you wanted to. In my case, it's not showing because I did it in C++. Um, same goes for that weapon. I attached the shield, and I did the same for pretty much all the, clothing I needed. And after that, not only I need to create that, but I also need to make sure that my meshes are following whatever the animation blueprint that the root has it. So the root in that sense for those elements are the mesh, which is get mesh, which is, if you open up the blueprint, the mesh has an M class attached to it, an animation blueprint. So if I don't make that extra step, I'm just going to have a bunch of meshes, like skeletal meshes, each one following their own animation blueprint, which would be not only sustainable to maintain, not only not performatic, but also pretty dumb to do it. So I just, later, after creating, I'm just setting the master pose component for each one of those elements to my mesh, and that's going to take care of the animations for me. So what that's pretty much doing is, okay, grab that hair mesh and use the same anim class as my mesh is doing. So I'm not setting this manually. That's kind of set up automatically for me just by using this set master pose component. And the same could be done and achieved under blueprint. So if you grab whatever, for example, the shoulder mesh, you can actually set that master pose component that way, and the new would be the mesh itself. So get mesh. So it would pretty much similar to this one. The difference is I'm not forcing the update, but if you could do that as well. But I'm assuming I'm not doing it because I think there is like a default parameter to this. No, there isn't. I think it's pretty straightforward, but you could pass it. It's an optional parameter. So once you do that, that's pretty much what you have to do to create the whole clothing system. So, and I know it sounds a lot simpler and it's a bit difficult to actually believe in it, but that's actually it. So once you do that, in order to set and change your clothing, it's just a matter of under whatever option of your game you want to change the clothing, is just grabbing whatever clothing you want to change and just typing set skeletal mesh and then change the mesh to a new one and re-init the pose. That's gonna basically change the mesh to whatever skeletal mesh or whatever other mesh you want it to. I do that in C++ though, and I do that under my inventory component, which is where I equip my items. So let me just find the equip item function. For example, I have equip clothing, equip weapon, and equip gear. So let me open, for example, the equip clothing. On this sense, I have like an inventory, and each inventory has its own data asset reference to it. So I kind of load that data asset, and since it's clothing, it's gonna have like which actually part of the clothing it is, and if it's already using a different clothing, so I can detach that clothing and unload that thing and use the new one only. So basically what I do is, if I can load that data asset, then I load my skeletal mesh reference, which is basically inside of that data asset. And you can see that this is indeed inside of, let me just grab any clothing as an example, the shoulder pad. If I open that up, you have the skeletal mesh reference to it. So I need to load that up. And once I load that up, if that works out, well, then I go through the whole inventory looking for a clothing of the same type that is currently active. And if it is, I'm just saving that information for me. And those, also attributes that clothing is giving to my extra attribute that I'm giving to the character. And I'm saving that into this slot index, which I started as -1. So I'm starting as -1. And if after doing like this whole for loop into my inventory, if my slot index is different than -1, that actually means that I found an item that is actually active and being used by the character of the same type. So what I need to do is I need to set my item to my old item to not active, which is basically setting that to false. And then I'm broadcasting an upload slot so I can upload my old slot to deactivate the slot, the style of the slot. And then after deactivating that item, I can then activate my new item. And for that, again, I said that each clothing has its specific part on the body to attach to it. So if it's a shoulder pad, I grab the shoulder mesh and I set the skeletal mesh in the same way as it did on the blueprint. If it's the belt mesh, I set the belt. If it's the chest, I set the chest, and etc., etc., etc. The only difference, and of course, I set also the new clothing item to be active, so my inventory can activate the slot style under the UI. And I also update my dummy character, which is something that I presented in a video before, where I explain how to create like a copy or a preview of your character under the UI. So not only I'm updating my actual character, but I'm also updating my dummy character in the main UI, so it can, have the proper clothing and the proper preview for the player to see it. And then I call this function apply effect, which is basically applying the effect of my new item minus my old item if I have one. And if I don't have one, pretty much those values will be 0. So as you can see, I started with 0. So if it didn't find anything, it's going to be -0. So it's not going to decrease anything. But if you found something, only the difference between those two is going to be applied to my character. And that's the magic of the gameplay ability system, which is basically just grabbing my character. And if I can find it, I grab my ability system and the attributes. And if I have it, then I just create the modifiers. And then I apply my health, my magic, my stamina, my strength, my speed of that item. And I also update my max speed and max stamina values, since I'm, changing that with a new item. And then I apply that effect to the character itself, which is basically applying the effect to itself. And this create modifier function is doing nothing else but, adding the magnitude, which is basically that value of the health that I'm decreasing or adding. And remember, if the previous item was, bigger, for example, it was giving 20 of health and the new item is going to give you only 10, then the result of that math, that calculation is going to be -10. So it's going to apply -10 to my character status. So basically that's how it's going to done. It's going to be changing that attribute that I pass, and it's changing the attributes with that tag that I created, which is basically this inventory clothing tag. And that's pretty much about it, what I do for clothing. If I do that for weapons, the only difference that I do for weapons though is, or for gears, is that my gears and weapons are static meshes in my character, and they need to be attached. I mean, the rest is pretty much the same, but the difference is I need to update the static mesh, not the skeletal mesh, and I need to specify also the uh, socket to attach if I want to change it, and that's because I'm being more proactive here. So for example, if it's the weapon type is a dual blade, instead of me attaching a weapon to the regular mesh, I'm attaching the second weapon to the weapon 2 socket, not the shield socket. And if it's not, it's just changing whatever needed. Um, And that's pretty much about it. I mean, it's doing the same thing again. So, and it's also updating the dummy character for that mesh. And what that actually does is, if I play now, and remember the basic stuff is doing all the character in the character. If I pick it up, for example, the shoulder pad, this weapon here, and I pick it up this shield, I can pick it up a couple potions as well, but I'm not applying any potions as far as, for now at least. So, and I can see that I'm gonna spawn like a enemy real quick here, just so you can see that right now, and I'm gonna show actually my debug, show debug ability system. So in the console command, you can see that my max health is 100. My health before change is 0 because I haven't changed my health anywhere. My max strength is 10. So focus on these side values, which is basically the strength, the stamina, the MP, which is match points, and etc. So if I hit my player, you can see that since my strength is 10, it's applying 10 of damage to my enemy. And if I now, oops, apply, let me equip this shoulder pad over here. You can see that my preview also updated to that shoulder pad. And if you see, my strength now is 15, and if I hit the player now, whoa, that's 15 of damage. And if I change that to my other one, and remember, this is the active one, I'm going to change to this one, which has 20, so it should increase my strength by 5. So if I apply that, it changed, and you can see that my strength now is just 20, and if I hit the player now, it's 20 of damage, and do the same for the clothing, and I can do the same for the shield. Now I have 31 of damage, but the character doesn't have as much health, so it's going to apply the rest of it. But if I spawn a new enemy, for example, and I hit the player now, I have 31 of strength, so that should be about the damage that I am going to apply to the character. And it's punching, but it's punching because I don't have a sword, so it's considered that I don't have like a sword and shield, so I'm not applying that animation. But if I equip my sword now, as you can see, the characters start moving a little bit different, and the, the punches are now sword slashes, and I have 46 of strength. And if I apply that, you can see that that's the damage I'm giving to the character or to the enemy right now, which is pretty damn cool. Um, and that should be about it. I mean, it's pretty simple. And another thing that I did as well, but that wasn't done before. I'm pretty sure you guys, after seeing my previous video, know how to change the UI based on the C++ classes, but basically I fixed a couple of issues right now as well, which is basically once I activate it, you can see that if I open the inventory, is activated yet. And if I, for example, equip these items here, and if I open the inventory, go back, those are the ones that are equipped. So, yep, that's pretty much it. And since I haven't equipped the shield, now my damage is 35 because my shield gives a little bit of strength to me. And that's about it. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. It's pretty simple stuff to do as well in blueprints. And if you want, for example, a character, and this clothing system actually can be expanded to a different things as well. For example, if you have dismemberment if you want a dismemberment in your game, for example, you cut it off beheaded someone in your game, cut off the head or cut off the arm based on a damage or something like that. You could also do that this way. The only difference though is instead of changing the mesh, you can either hide the mesh and then spawn a new arm or something like that equal to what you have, or you can just grab that one and detach from component. And that should be about it. You're going to detach that arm from your character, and that's going to be, floating somewhere else. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So, quick summary again: create your skeletal meshes or static meshes into your character under the CPP folder. Created those as well. And after creating, or of course, if you have weapons attached then to the proper socket, and after that, just set up the master pose component to whatever the main mesh of your character that has the animation blueprint, set it up to it. And that's pretty much all the thing that you want to do. Once you want to change the clothing system, let me just go back to the inventory component. Once you want to change the clothing system, if it's a static mesh, just set it, just grab that item, which is in that case is return me the offensive weapon, and just grab that. If it's a static mesh, change the stat to static mesh. Set static mesh to the new one, attach to the proper socket. And if you're doing that with the skeletal mesh, just do the opposite. Instead of set static mesh, set the skeletal mesh. And that's about it. Hope you like it.